Imagine a man who could trigger a local earthquake in the heart of New York using a device no larger than an alarm clock. A man who planned to illuminate the entire Atlantic Ocean by transforming the Earth's atmosphere into a giant fluorescent lamp, and who claimed with complete gravity to be receiving rhythmic signals from a civilization on Mars. In January 1943, hours after the body of the 86-year-old inventor was found in a shabby room at the Hotel New Yorker, FBI agents and the Office of Alien Property immediately cordoned off the floor. They cracked his safes and seized dozens of crates filled with blueprints and manuscripts. Why did the government so desperately fear the papers of a penniless old man who spent his final years talking to pigeons? The answer is hidden in those very folders. Detailed diagrams of death rays capable of melting steel from hundreds of kilometers away, and concepts for transmitting pure energy through the very crust of the planet. Today we use Wi-Fi, smartphones, and alternating current, never suspecting that Nikola Tesla described it all when horse-drawn carriages still ruled the roads. Who was he really? A prophet who cracked the code of reality, or a madman who nearly destroyed the world with his experiments? Today, we follow the tracks of the most mysterious and majestic life in the history of science. Tesla's story begins as if written by a Hollywood screenwriter with a penchant for mysticism. Midnight between July 9th and 10th, 1856, in the tiny village of Smiljan, the Balkan sky is literally torn apart by a fierce, almost apocalyptic lightning storm. Legend says that at the moment of the most powerful lightning strike, which shook the walls of the house, Nikola was born. The midwife, crossing herself in terror, called the infant a child of darkness, but his mother, Nikola Tesla, herself the daughter of a self-taught inventor, firmly replied, "No, he will be a child of light." From early childhood, Nikola wasn't just strange, he was different. His brain functioned in a mode that today would be called hyper-realistic, augmented reality. He suffered from inexplicable flashes of light, followed by detailed, three-dimensional images of objects appearing before his eyes. If someone mentioned a wheel, Nikola didn't just remember it. He saw it in space, examining every crack in the wood and smelling it. This trait initially terrified him, making him fear he was losing his mind. But later, it became his ultimate superhuman tool. Tesla didn't need blueprints, rulers, or physical models. He built his most complex inventions in the infinite digital space of his mind, decades before computers existed. He could assemble an engine of hundreds of parts in his head, start it, and leave it running for weeks. Weeks later, he would look inside the device to check which parts had worn out or begun to vibrate. And when he finally translated the project into metal, it worked flawlessly from the first second. No prototypes, no errors. It was magic disguised as engineering. However, the path to recognition lay through overcoming his own fragility. In his youth, Tesla nearly died of cholera. 9 months he was bedridden, and doctors gave up hope. It was then that a turning point occurred. Nikola's father, who dreamed of seeing his son as a priest, promised in despair that if he survived, he would allow him to study engineering. As if fueled by this new purpose, Nikola began to recover. He went to Graz, where he studied physics and electrical engineering with a fanaticism bordering on self-destruction. He slept only 2 hours a day, read everything he could find, and argued with professors about the flaws of direct current, DC, motors. At 28, realizing Europe was too small for his ideas, Tesla decided to conquer America. He arrived in New York in 1884 with only a few clothes, a book of his own poetry, and a letter of recommendation to Thomas Edison. He had only 4 cents left in his pocket. His other money and tickets were stolen during a mutiny on the ship. Walking the streets of New York, he was struck by the filth and chaos, but above him buzzed a web of dangerous, sparking DC wires. Edison was already a legend, but his system had a fundamental flaw. Direct current could not be transmitted over long distances. Power stations had to be built every 2 kilometers, or the voltage would simply melt away in the wires. Tesla came to Edison with a solution, the alternating current, AC system. But Edison, a harsh pragmatist and owner of hundreds of DC patents, laughed at the Serbian theorist. He hired Tesla for menial work, repairing broken generators on ships and in factories. To get rid of the persistent youth, Edison promised Tesla a massive sum of $50,000 if he could radically improve the machine's efficiency. Tesla worked like a man possessed, going days without sleep and forgetting to eat. A year later, he presented 24 new machine designs that completely solved the problem. But when Nikola politely asked for his payment, Edison, puffing on a cigar, told him he didn't understand American humor. Instead of a fortune, he was offered a $10 a week raise. Tesla didn't argue. He put on his hat and walked out of Edison's lab forever. The darkest times of his life followed. The greatest genius of the era was forced to dig ditches for Edison's wires just to afford a bowl of soup. Но именно в этой нищете он встретил людей, которые услышали его. His ideas for a polyphase AC system were so revolutionary that industrialist George Westinghouse backed him. Thus began the War of Currents, the dirtiest battle in technological history. Edison launched an unprecedented black PR campaign, publicly electrocuting animals with AC to convince people it was the breath of death. He even lobbied for the first electric chair to use Tesla's current to evoke primal terror in every household. Tesla responded with a miracle. At the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, he flipped a switch and hundreds of thousands of lamps flooded the complex with light. Then he stepped onto the stage and passed 2 million volts through his own body. In total silence, his body was enveloped in a mystical blue glow, with micro-lightning jumping from his fingertips. He showed that alternating current was not a killer, but a submissive force. After this triumph, he fulfilled his childhood dream, harnessing Niagara Falls. He built the world's first major hydroelectric plant, and the energy of falling water began to power homes hundreds of miles away. It was the end of the Edison era, and the beginning of the age of Tesla. However, Tesla was bored with simply lighting up streets. In 1899, in Colorado Springs, he built a laboratory with a 40-meter mast topped with a copper sphere. Locals believed he was summoning the devil. Lightning bolts shot from the lab, and thunder shattered windows kilometers away. During these experiments, Tesla discovered that the Earth is a giant conductor with its own resonant frequency. One night, his instruments recorded rhythmic signals. 1, 2, 3. Tesla was convinced it was contact from Mars. Only 70 years later did scientists realize he was likely the first human to hear radio emissions from pulsars. Returning to New York, Tesla convinced J.P. Morgan to finance the Wardenclyffe project. A futuristic tower rose on Long Island, intended to be the information brain of the planet. A century before the internet, Tesla described a world where messages, music, and photos could be sent instantly to a device no bigger than a watch. But the tower had a secret goal, the wireless transmission of free energy. When Morgan realized he couldn't put a meter on free energy to get a profit, the funding was cut. Wardenclyffe was later dynamited for scrap. Tesla was systematically erased from history, Radio patents were given to Marconi, though he used 17 of Tesla's designs. Tesla spent his last 30 years in hotel rooms, his OCD reaching its peak. He feared germs, walked around buildings 3 times before entering, and required exactly 18 napkins at every meal. Yet his mind continued to generate ideas like Teleforce or death rays. He believed if every country had such a weapon, war would lose its meaning. Rumors swirled that the Tunguska event was a failed experiment of his, though no proof was found. By the end, his only friends were the pigeons in Bryant Park. On January 7th, 1943, the 86-year-old genius died in his sleep. Hours later, the government seized his notes. Officially, they were called philosophical, but his ideas were later used for long-range submarine communication and ionospheric experiments. Nikola Tesla died in poverty, but he defeated time. We live in a matrix of his ideas. Every time you connect to Wi-Fi, use a microwave, or see an electric car, you touch his legacy. He once said, "The present is theirs, the future, for which I have really worked, is mine." Tesla didn't just invent the 20th century. He invented the future we are still trying to catch.